A creature with horns, claws, and a 1,000-foot-long body flew over the sea and disappeared into the storm. That's not a legend. That's a record. Written more than 2,000 years ago by Chinese scribes who didn't question what they saw. They documented it. They gave it a name, Yinglong, the winged dragon. One of many detailed entries found across 3 ancient Chinese scrolls, texts so old they predate most organized religions. These scrolls don't describe dragons as metaphors. They list them as facts, habitat, behavior, size, abilities, as if someone stood there and watched. The first scroll is the Shan Hai Jing, the classic of mountains and seas. It doesn't speculate. It catalogs. It says that Yinglong lives in the East Sea, has wings, eyes that glow like stone lanterns, and a body long enough to coil across the sky. It doesn't call him a god or a symbol. It calls him a helper in war. It claims he assisted the Yellow Emperor in defeating a rival, turning the tide of battle from the air. Another entry speaks of the Filong, the flying dragon. Unlike Yinglong, it has no wings. It rides the wind like smoke. Wherever it passes, the weather breaks. Lightning follows it. Rain obeys it. These are not isolated descriptions. The Shan Hai Jing mentions dragons repeatedly, each with unique forms, powers, and locations. The scroll treats them like species. Real, distinct, each with a purpose. Some live deep under rivers. Others coil around mountaintops or sleep beneath deserts. One is called the Dragon of the North Sea, with a white body, 4 horns, and a tail like a thunder whip. The scroll says it governs the direction of winter, and that its appearance signals the arrival of storms no one survives. Another is called Zhulong, the torch dragon. It is said to be a red dragon with a human face, a snake-like body that stretches across the horizon, and eyes that open and close to control day and night. The scroll claims it lives in the far north, where the sky meets the edge of the earth. When Zhulong opens its eyes, the world is bathed in light. When it closes them, darkness falls. No metaphors, no interpretation. The scroll treats this as a function of nature. The dragon is part of how the world works. Another passage names a black dragon that guards a river of molten metal. The locals feared it, not because it killed, but because it never moved. It stared from the same position for centuries. The scroll calls it the Silent One, and says that anyone who made eye contact with it went blind for 7 days. In these passages, dragons are not kings or monsters. They are forces. They define terrain, control seasons, alter vision. The Shan Hai Jing organizes them by region, size, and effect. It's more like a field manual than a myth, a warning written in layers of ink, passed from one terrified generation to the next. Some dragons in the Shan Hai Jing are not described by what they do, but by what happens around them. One, said to dwell in the forests of the eastern mountain range, has no wings and no known call. Yet whenever it was seen, the local animals began to migrate inland. Trees shed their leaves out of season, and lakes nearby turned opaque. The scroll offers no explanation. It simply says this is what follows its presence. Another dragon is described as living between 2 peaks that were once volcanoes. Its body is golden, its horns twisted backward like rams, and it moves only once every 100 years. When it does, the rivers around it shift course. Villages disappear. The scroll includes notes of the years this happened, treating it like a repeating cycle, not a random event. Then there are the smaller dragons, creatures not of dominance, but of precision. One is described as being no larger than a crocodile, but with wings made of translucent film, and a body that emits smoke when angered. It is said to live in hot springs, and its arrival turns the water black. Travelers who drank from these springs were said to lose their voices for a full moon. The scroll does not say why. It only lists the symptoms. Each of these creatures is marked with the same seriousness as a map coordinate. The language is clinical, cold, and that's what makes it worse. These are not legends being passed down to entertain. They are warnings, coded instructions for surviving a world that once had rules different from ours. Among the most unusual dragons in the Shan Hai Jing is one that never leaves the ground. It is described as having a body of stone, limbs buried beneath the soil, and a face covered in moss. Locals call it the sleeper. It does not fly. It does not roar. But the earth above it rises and falls with a slow rhythm, as if it breathes beneath the mountain. Once every 3 decades, the scroll says, the sleeper opens its mouth, and a sound like grinding metal echoes for miles. No one has ever seen it move. But forests nearby have been known to sink overnight, entire hills folding inward as if something beneath them had shifted. Another passage describes a dragon with mirrors for scales, said to live in a canyon where sunlight only reaches at noon. The scroll notes that when this dragon appears, birds fly into cliffs, unable to see. Travelers become disoriented, walking in circles until they collapse. Some say the dragon reflects not light, but thought. That to see it is to lose the direction of your own mind. Near the end of the scroll's dragon records, there is a brief but vivid account. A hunter tracking deer along a dry riverbed sees the bones of fish scattered across the stones. He follows them upstream. The air grows heavy. Then, without sound or movement, a single golden eye opens between the rocks. No attack follows, no chase. The hunter drops his spear and runs. The scroll lists this as a sighting, nothing more. That is the tone the Shan Hai Jing maintains until its final page. Observations without judgment, names without explanation. As if it were never meant to convince, only to record. There is one final detail in the Shan Hai Jing that shifts the tone from observation to implication. A brief passage mentions a dragon with 7 tails and eyes shaped like coins. The scroll calls it a bridge between forms, and then moves on without explanation. Some scholars later argued it might represent transformation or rebirth, but the original text offers no such interpretation. It simply exists, one dragon unlike the rest, unbound by terrain. Whether it was seen, imagined, or feared more than the others is left unsaid. This ambiguity is what makes the scroll feel less like a book and more like a fractured memory passed through hands that had no time to embellish. With that, the record of dragons in the Shan Hai Jing comes to an end. But the second scroll opens a different kind of door. Unlike the first, it was not written to catalog creatures or lands. It is a chronological account of real political events, battles, treaties, and the reigns of kings. It is where the mythology of dragons intersects with the machinery of history. In the Zuo Zhuan, dragons are not described in pages of detail. They do not dominate the text. But when they do appear, their timing is precise, and their consequences immediate. In the 18th year of Duke Zhuang's reign, the scroll records that a dragon was seen rising from the river near the city of Ru. Witnesses claimed it had a green body, no wings, and antlers like a stag. Its movement caused the river to part, exposing dry ground for several minutes before the waters closed again. The appearance was followed by days of violent rainfall that destroyed the grain stores. The scroll lists this as a turning point in the year's record, not as myth, but as fact. The dragon appears. The famine begins. In another entry, a dragon is seen in the northern skies during the burial procession of a regional lord. The scroll describes its form as stretching from cloud to cloud, with flashes of red light across its back. It does not breathe fire or descend. It watches. The observers fall silent. The priest leading the rites stops mid-ritual, drops his staff, and walks into the woods. He is never found. These dragons are not described with ornate language, but their presence bends the world around them. Commanders fall ill, crops fail, rituals break. The Zuo Zhuan does not try to explain why. It only ensures that we remember what came before and what followed. In yet another entry from the Zuo Zhuan, during the 6th year of Duke Xiang's reign, the scroll notes that a group of fishermen encountered a creature near the estuary of the Yellow River. They described it as covered in bronze-colored scales, with a jaw wide enough to swallow a boat, and eyes that reflected the moon even when the sky was overcast. They abandoned their nets and fled inland. Days later, the tides reversed direction for an entire night, flooding salt fields that had been dry for generations. No names were recorded, no penalties assigned. The dragon's presence was treated as a disruption in the flow of time and nature. What makes these reports unique is their consistency in tone. They do not call the creature divine. They do not seek to praise or curse it. They observe. Each account sits between reports of taxation, marriage alliances, and temple repairs. The dragon appears, causes imbalance, and is replaced by silence. This pattern repeats often enough to feel deliberate. The scribe does not draw connections, but the reader is forced to. If the dragon is real in the scroll, then so are its effects. And if those effects mirror political collapse or environmental disaster, then perhaps the dragon was not simply a beast, but a signal. A presence the world was once forced to respond to, whether it understood it or not. The final entry involving a dragon in the Zuo Zhuan is brief but sharp. It speaks of a drought that lasted 2 years. No offerings worked. No rituals produced rain. Then, one night, 3 elders from the village of Pingyi saw a black-scaled creature rise from a dry well. It arched through the air and vanished behind the hills. The next morning, the sky turned gray and rain fell for 7 days without pause. Crops were saved. The scroll marks the event with no embellishment. The dragon rose, then the rain came. The presence of dragons in the Zuo Zhuan does not ask to be believed. It asks to be remembered. The 3rd scroll approaches dragons from an entirely different angle. Known as the Huainanzi, it is a philosophical text written during the Han Dynasty, blending cosmology, ethics, politics, and metaphysics. Unlike the previous scrolls, which recorded dragons as physical events or creatures tied to the land, the Huainanzi treats them as embedded in the structure of reality itself. Dragons appear as regulators of balance, agents of harmony, and embodiments of natural force. One passage explains that dragons control the movement of clouds not through will, but because they are made of the same substance as mist. It describes them as extensions of qi, life energy, that condense into visible form when the balance between yin and yang shifts too far in one direction. In this view, a dragon does not fly because it chooses to. It flies because the sky needs correction. Another section details the role of dragons in seasons. It states that when spring begins too early, a green dragon rises from the earth to delay the blooming of trees. Not with violence, but with presence. The scroll describes its body as long as a mountain range, eyes closed, resting beneath the soil, releasing cold breath through cracks in the ground. Frost returns, buds retract, the calendar realigns. The dragon never moves above the surface. Its work is complete. In another chapter, the Huainanzi speaks of the azure dragon of the east, an elemental guardian not bound to flesh, but to direction. It claims that this dragon governs not only wind and growth, but also judgment. When rulers grow corrupt, the azure dragon sends signs: locusts with blue wings, rivers that boil without fire, and dreams filled with serpents. If ignored, the dragon withdraws its presence, and the state collapses. These are not threats. They are consequences. The Huainanzi sees dragons not as animals or spirits, but as self-correcting instruments of the world. Further into the Huainanzi, one section addresses the origins of dragons in a way no previous scroll dares to. It claims that dragons do not live in the world, but pass through it. They are not born, and they do not die. They appear when imbalance begins to solidify, when a kingdom starts to forget the sky and the earth are part of the same breath. In one recorded lesson from the scroll, a master tells his disciples that dragons are the only beings that can traverse between the realms of form and emptiness without losing themselves. He says, a tiger rules the forest, but forgets the mountain. A bird rules the sky, but forgets the wind. A dragon remembers both. This teaching is not poetry, it's instruction. A dragon is presented as a reminder of continuity, the thread that keeps extremes from breaking apart. The scroll goes further. It mentions a dragon with no shape, only presence, that circles above regions where human suffering becomes too concentrated. It does not intervene. It hovers. The air beneath it grows still. Insects stop chirping. Fires burn with no smoke. The scroll offers no name, only a title, the one who sees. When this dragon appears, rulers reportedly dream of drowning, and children are born with white eyes. The implication is that the dragon is not here to punish or save. It is here to witness, and in witnessing, to alter the course of what follows. At no point does the Huainanzi offer a single definitive image of a dragon. Instead, it gives fragments, a flash in the fog, a sound in the wind, a trail of wind circling a mountain that has no source. Through all of it, the dragon is both effect and signal, not an enemy, not an ally, a presence that the world once accepted as part of how things were meant to stay whole. The final passages of the Huainanzi treat dragons as more than agents of nature. They become metaphors made solid, instructions encoded in shape. One tale within the scroll speaks of a sage who lived atop the Jade Ridge and meditated without speaking for 9 years. On the final day, a serpent with antlers approached him through the mist. It did not speak. It lowered its head and coiled 3 times around his body without touching him. When it withdrew, the sage opened his eyes and wept. The scroll records that he descended the mountain and predicted the fall of the dynasty 3 years before it occurred. The text does not debate what he saw. It states only that after the dragon appeared, he understood something humans were not meant to grasp. Another entry speaks of a mountain that had no name until a dragon landed on its summit during a lunar eclipse. The villagers called it the Peak of Return. They say from that night onward, travelers who reached the top saw flashes of their own deaths in the clouds. No one ever climbed it twice. The Huainanzi does not warn the reader. It doesn't caution against seeing dragons or seeking them, but it implies that encountering one is a kind of fracture, a moment that rewires the observer. Some dragons bring balance. Some bring clarity. Others bring nothing but the certainty that something old is watching. The scroll ends its reflections on dragons by stating that the wise do not seek dragons, and the wicked cannot see them. That sentence closes the final chapter. No elaboration, no summary. It leaves the reader in silence, and in that silence, the idea of dragons becomes heavier, not lighter. They are not explained. They are simply there, across 3 ancient scrolls, written thousands of years ago, before belief and fiction were ever separated. These records do not argue. They do not persuade. They remember, and what they remember has shape, movement, and consequence. The dragons were seen. The dragons were catalogued, and they may never have left.